Wisconsin Senator Ron Johnson is with me now. He is one of the Republicans planning to object to the electoral vote count tomorrow. So, Senator Johnson, I've been talking with your colleagues, those who are also on the list. Senator Lankford joined me yesterday, and he said that the objective is not to necessarily flip the presidential election. There's a lot more to it than that. Please tell us.
Oh, hello, Harris. Happy New Year. Now, I think the main problem from my standpoint is you have so many people in the mainstream media, certainly Democrats, that just want to sweep this under the rug, that just want to dismiss these very serious and legitimate concerns of what happened during the 2020 election. There are many irregularities. We've been looking into some, some have been explained, but some haven't. And the fact of the matter is, when you have tens of millions of Americans who simply don't believe this is a legitimate outcome, we've just gone through 4 years where Democrats and the extreme left simply did not acknowledge President Trump as the legitimate president. And now here we are because of COVID, because of a more than doubling of the number of absentee ballots, while at the same time Democrats pushed the envelope, relaxing standards. There are some real problems here, and the problem's not going away. The only solution I can come up with is investigate, explain, be transparent, but sweeping this under the rug, as many people want us to do, simply won't work.
You know what's interesting, and I've had voters ask me this very question, I'll put it to you. If this were a situation where others were disenfranchised and it weren't Republicans, what you're doing benefits everybody, because you got to take a look at those areas that are broken. So going forward, everybody has more faith.
Well, I think that's exactly right. And I think one of the issues I think we want to make is state legislatures are empowered by the Constitution to set the time, manner, and place of elections. And yet many state legislatures abdicated to unelected judges, unelected election officials, and we've seen it time and time again. So, maybe this is the warning to state legislatures. If you don't want your citizens, their votes disenfranchised, not counted, step up the plate, assume your responsibility, take control over your own elections. Don't let judges, don't let election officials do it for you.
This is breaking right now, Senator. Just moments ago, Oklahoma Senator James Inhofe with a statement saying that he will now not challenge tomorrow's vote count during the joint session. He says, quote unquote, to challenge a state certification, given how specific the Constitution, would be a violation of the oath of office. That is not something I am willing to do, and it is not something Oklahomans would want me to do. He, of course, is breaking with fellow Oklahoma Senator James Lankford, who was on this very program yesterday. What is causing a divide in your party? What is the issue that you line up on one side or the other of?
Well, I really don't think there's as large a divide as people think. I think we're all concerned about, Congress or the federal government overturning a state election. None of us want to contemplate that, quite honestly. But where you have this type of abuse, I think the biggest issue is those of us that are challenging this refuse to just dismiss it, to sweep it under the rug. I don't think we can do this. This problem isn't going away. But I think most of us share the concerns of our colleagues that we don't want to set a dangerous precedent here either. We really do respect state rights. We respect and we really are calling on state legislatures, again, to assume the responsibility. Don't abdicate it to unelected judges and election officials. Step up to the plate, investigate the wrongdoing, investigate the irregularities in your states, and fix them.
Real quickly, what do you say to all of those millions upon millions of Trump supporters, 74 million of them, if and when this might not flip the presidential election contest results the way that the president has forecast?
Well, first of all, being conservative means that you respect the rule of law. We just confirmed a bunch of judges that apply the law, knowing that I'm not going to like a lot of their decisions because there's a lot of bad law out there. So we do have to, in the end, respect the rule of law, even when we don't like the decisions. But, from my standpoint, if we win Georgia, I'm encouraging every Georgian, every Republican Georgian to get out there and vote for Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue. But if we retain the majority, I'll be chairman of the Senate Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations, and I will guarantee that I'm going to dig into this. I'm going to investigate, and I'm going to find out what the truth is. And again, what we can explain, we'll set that aside. But where there's some problems, we really do need to fix them.
Interesting. So it will go beyond tomorrow if Republicans stay in the majority in the Senate, per you. Senator Ron Johnson, good to see you today. Thank you.
Take care.